Corporate players such as Brown Brothers and Craigie Knowe have invested here. But will this shift change the distinct flavour of the Tasmanian wine industry? Fiona Blackwood reports.
John Austwick has enjoyed some of the world's best drops, but this bottle is special. It's his last homemade vintage, and he's sharing it with the man who helped plant his vineyard more than 30 years ago, Julian Alcorso.
This is, one of the
traditional Cabernet.
Yeah, traditional Cabernet, but one of the few areas in Tassie that can grow Cabernet and ripen Cabernet, and I think that's, this is a good testament to that.
The Cabernet-friendly part of Tasmania is the hamlet of Cranbrook on the east coast. It's where John Austwick decided to establish the Craigie Knowe vineyard in 1979.
I've got now 6 or 8 clients on the east coast, and I would say our best grapes are now coming from this area.
But there was a time when the neighbouring farmers thought John Austwick was mad for growing grapes instead of grazing sheep.
I was a bit of a laughing stock around the district, I must admit. Who's that fool planting vines?
Undeterred, he built a shed on the property and started making wine himself. How would you describe your style of winemaking, do you think?
Oh, peasant-like and hands-on. Simple as that,
And his reason for doing it was pretty simple too. He'd enjoyed some good French reds when he was working as a dentist in London.
Let's move on, Rothschild. In my opinion, if you've got a bottle of that, you're in heaven.
He wanted to taste heaven again when he moved to Tasmania.
We made our first vintage, which I think was 11 bottles, which Julian Alcorso helped me make. My daughters trotted in a rubbish bin, and we went on from there.
Julian Alcorso and his father Claudio were also making their way into the world of winemaking in Hobart's northern suburbs.
Totally hit and miss. It was learning on the run. It really was. Our winemaking was like most Italian families. The grapes were planted in the backyard because that's what you do when you're a European.
But there was little support from the government at the time.
Tasmania, in Tasmania we grow apples, not grapes, and, keep away from it. So there was a positive antagonism towards it, which gradually changed to a real enthusiasm.
That change was helped along by a forward-thinking Legislative Council.
Well, in 1976 there was a bill that came to the Legislative Council from the lower house, and the Legislative Council actually amended the bill to limit the amount of mainland grapes that could go into Tasmanian wines.
Been proven in the sense of the grapes now that it's reverse traffic, isn't it? They buy our grapes, Tasmanian grapes, and take them to the mainland. Proves itself.
Now Tasmanian grapes attract a premium price.
A tonne of Pinot Noir grapes grown in Tassie will sell for about $3,500 to $3,800 for a tonne. The average price of grapes on the mainland is somewhere in the order of $300 a tonne.
It's helped the industry grow. There are now 230 vineyards in Tasmania.
We have 160 licensed producers, so I guess they're the producers that really produce their own label and are in a position to actually market their wines to consumers.
Springvale Winery is one of them. It's one of 8 vineyards now in Cranbrook where John Austwick started it all.
Back then, when my father-in-law Rodney and his wife planted the original vineyard here, they didn't drink wine. It was really just a diversification from cropping and sheep.
Like a good vintage, the business is getting better with age.
We're finally starting to get some vine age. Our eldest vines are, 25, and they're really only now starting to show their potential.
Family-run vineyards are still common in Tasmania, but lately there's been some buy-ups by big corporations.
The biggest announcement in recent times was the acquisition by Brown Brothers of the Tamar Ridge Estates portfolio.
Craigie Knowe owns Piper's Brook in the Tamar Valley, and several high-profile South Australian wine companies have bought vineyards here, and that's just to name a few. Is there a risk, though, that Tasmania might lose some of its charm because of this interest from big investors?
I think we have a long way to go before that would probably happen.
In fact, many in the industry believe it can only help.
That's telling every other Tasmanian producer that we're in the right place, and it's also sending a message to the rest of the wine world, I guess, that they have a lot of faith in what the potential is down here.
The Tasmanian wine industry is punching above its weight. It's attracting accolades for wines and winemakers and will be hosting the prestigious International Cool Climate Wine Symposium next year. But it only accounts for 0.5% of the total national production, and only 8% of Tasmanian wine is exported. And while other states are grappling with a glut, Tasmanian producers are facing the opposite challenge, where demand is outstripping supply.
They're all, in the context, very, very small. They're making, 5 to 10,000 cases of wine, which is very, very small. And, we need more. We really do need to grow to get a critical mass to make a real impact on the mainland.
But that's a job for the next generation. John Austwick has sold his vineyard to a US investor, but it will retain its flavour.
We've got local winemakers, a world-class vineyard facility right next door to actually make all of the wines. So I think Craigie Knowe, it's important that it always be maintained as a local story.
That leaves John Austwick with plenty of time to savour his love of wine.
It's just a beautiful drink. It has a nice acidity about it, has fruit about it, has a lovely nose. It's generally got a nice purplish colour about it. It goes well with the food you're eating. They're just complementary. Food, wine and company, they all go together.
4,000 visitors have gone through the doors of Launceston's revamped Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery since it reopened 2 months ago. $7 million transformation has allowed conservators and curators to